Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and I work with a lot of individuals with attachment wounds. I work with a lot of avoidant individuals specifically, and so a lot of my knowledge will be leaning towards that particular aspect. And I noticed something about a lot of the couples that I work with and just avoidance in general. There are some truths about being in love with a avoidant, being in a relationship with an avoidant, both ends for you guys, by the way. I'm talking to both sides. There are almost like some hard truths, I guess is how I'm going to label the title. I haven't figured that part out yet. But these are just some things that I feel people don't recognize is almost misunderstood about relationships with avoidance. And it's also to help people understand that relationships with avoidance and relationships in general are not easy. And certain aspects need to be in place, or typically should be in place, to help both individuals come together and heal. That probably didn't make full sense, but when I explain it, I hope it makes a little bit more sense. So the very first one, the hard truths about being in a relationship with avoidance, is love is usually not enough on both sides. And I feel like this is true in general with relationships. A lot of people asked about my educational background. So I'm also a doctoral student. I'm not done with my doctorate. It's in psychology, which means that once I finish, I will be a psychologist. I am not a psychologist yet. I'm practicing out of my master's, which in, I think, every state in the United States, you can do that, right? You can get independently licensed or under supervision, whatever your version is. On your master's, and then you can still also do your doctorate. You can finish your doctorate, right? And so my dissertation has a lot of elements of relationships. And one thing I noticed, and I can't tell you about my research because I'm not done. I don't have my doctorate yet. But this is actually common in a lot of relationships in general, even secure relationships. It's the hard truth of relationships in general, which is love is just not enough. And I don't think people like to hear that, but it's true. Love is not enough typically. And there's a lot of research that shows this, by the way. And both of the habits that you had with an avoidant or just relationships in general were there before y'all met, right? They're there. They were there. They were created before the relationship. And they're incredibly challenging to reform a lot of these behaviors in place overnight. They're going to take a long time, and this includes attachment wounds. This includes defense mechanisms. This includes deactivation strategies, which I kind of consider a defense mechanism. It includes a lot of the behaviors that are there, and the preemptive, also the assumptions, by the way. All these types of things were there before you guys met. So the love, the feeling of love, even the commitment of love is not necessarily enough unless you continue to commit to love continuously, not just once, but continuously. And so bringing that to kind of a sub point of this first one, it means that it's very important to marry individuals, not just for the feeling of love, but also for character, for similar interests, for the ability to rekindle after a fight, for any progress that has been shown in the relationship. That's also really important because I really am a firm believer that if there is progress and you guys both feel like there is, maybe it's something worth salvaging. That's just my perspective. And I could be wrong, and every relationship is different. And that's not a one size fits all, but it's just something to think about. It's usually not a good idea, at least especially with avoidance, to just marry or want this person just from chemistry. Now, a lot of individuals get attached to their avoidant partner from the beginning stage, where the avoidant is still not showing you their true self because of their shame wound. And so they're almost faking. It's not in a manipulative way. It's because they're embarrassed by who they are, but they're trying to be somebody they're not. And you kind of fell for that. And if you're not recognizing that your avoidant partner is not changing at all, you're in love with that perspective of who they showed you, not necessarily continuously loving them for who they are. And same with them. They may love you for how they felt in the beginning, but that's not usually enough. You have to continue to work towards working through the relationship, which means both of you guys have to show some change, right? And that means if the avoidant individual is not showing change, the relationship may not necessarily work. And I don't mean change who you are. I'm not saying change your personality and become a different person. I'm just saying change, compromise, accommodate the relationship into your life, integrate it is probably a better way to say it. I probably should have said that. The next one is some hard truths about being in a relationship with an avoidant is you don't just marry their behavior and character, you also marry their habits. So, or you're in a relationship with their habits, which means if they have a habit of every weekend they need to decompress and they don't like to socialize on weekends pretty much ever, that's probably going to always be there. That's something that you're going to have to accept if you want to be in a relationship with this person. That means that even if you guys live together, you might have to do things. If you want to go out or hang out with your friends or do something, it's very likely that that's not going to be happening every weekend with you and your partner. That just might be you alone. And just because they need their time to decompress. And it's very important to understand that it might be helpful to marry somebody who has similar habits to you. That's why a lot of avoidants tend to, but a lot of avoidants actually marry within, let me say it a little better. Fearful avoidance and dismissive avoidance are a common pair, and I see that one work a lot because they both have similar habits. And that doesn't mean anxious and avoidant doesn't work. I see that working a lot as well, but it just means you guys kind of have to accept that about one another. So that means also understanding each other's sleep schedule, cleaning habits, work-life balance. Those things are also important to keep in mind. Okay. The next one is when an avoidant is triggered, they will sometimes say something they don't actually mean. And on top of that, they don't always realize it. I know. I think a lot of people are not going to like this one. And I get it. I do understand. Okay. I'm going to paint an example for you guys. Let's say we have a patient. Let's say he's a dismissive avoidant male. Let's paint this picture. And when he started dating his anxious preoccupied partner, he said, I will never get married, right? That's what he told her, let's just say. That's actually him putting like a boundary up because he's preemptively preparing that he's going to be pressured for marriage, which is why he's bouncing back on this non-existent pressure. I don't even know if I'm explaining this right. Let's just roll with it. And so he automatically says, I will never get married when they first start dating because he doesn't want her to pressure him. That's what he's actually preparing for, right? And so he's putting that as a trigger, a preparation. That doesn't actually mean he's never going to get married. So I know people are going to get mad about this one. I get it. I'm not saying that every avoidant is magically going to get married one day. That's not what I'm saying. Some don't get married. But what I'm saying is this patient that we're talking about, he is actually not saying I will never get married. His words are, but what he's actually saying is I'm saying this so that you don't pressure me to get married. So he's saying I will never get married so that in her mind she accepts or she's prepared to never get married so that her desire for marriage doesn't pressure him. So that once she stops wanting it, then he feels like, okay, now there's no pressure. Now I can get married to her on my own time. I probably just made you guys go through like a weird labyrinth there. Sorry. I hope that you got it because I am not sure I can explain it. I'm trying. And so I see this a lot where an avoidant says, I'll never get married. And then once the pressure's off and, their partner is suddenly accepting this, which is not good, by the way. This is not healthy, but it's just the reality. Then, suddenly he's like proposing or he's planning to get married and they're normally very happy. And then they're married and then they work through whatever issues they have after that, but they get married and they're happy about it and they're healing. So that's like a hard truth about being with an avoidant that's really different from other attachment styles. I don't really see this commonly with any other attachment except fearful and dismissive avoidance, especially dismissive avoidance. And it's also important to recognize that they may say things due to their wounds, and it has nothing to do with you. A lot of fearful avoidance might be like, all men are controlling, let's just say. And let's just say this fearful avoidant we're talking about now is a female. So she's like, all men are controlling. So let's say you are an anxious, preoccupied man and you say, text me when you get home. And you're just saying that because you care. And then she goes, all men are controlling. You're just trying to control me. And she's like pushing back. It's a wound. It's a perception she has. That can happen too. So she's not actually saying she doesn't want to tell you, even though you're going to perceive it like that. It's because she thinks you're trying to control her. So if she starts trusting you and believing you're not trying to control her, she would be fine with texting you when she gets home. That probably didn't make sense either. I'm trying. I'm so sorry. And so usually what happens is once these wounds heal, they may say things in a more healthy way. They may have, and may be able to meet your expectations. And usually when they're trusting you more, they're more comfortable with these certain things. And I am not saying for you to wait around. I'm just sharing what I've observed as a therapist. I'm just telling you what I observe. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong. I'm just sharing what I notice, okay? The next thing is, this is unfortunate, and I would say that this is common with all relationships, but it is a hard truth about being with an avoidant. Comparing your relationship with other relationships may be detrimental to your relationship, and it'll disguise subconsciously some of the good aspects about your relationship. So what do I mean by that? Most relationships with an avoidant, the timeline is really different. It doesn't even look the same. Right? Like, a lot of avoidants don't like, holding hands in public. They don't like, sometimes they just don't want bedroom intimacy and they're too uncomfortable about it. Or maybe some of them even have trauma about it. So the frequency of that may be different. So when you look at another relationship, if you're not an avoidant, and you compare it, you may think, okay, wow, my partner doesn't love me at all. Like, our relationship's so different. Like, what's wrong with our relationship? And then you miss over all of the good things about your relationship. And you miss the parts about your partner where they are showing you their love, like the consistency. Avoidance, when they care about you, they're extremely consistent, typically. Not all of them, but especially dismissive avoidance, very consistent. They are going to, if they say something, they're going to do it. They're going to try. But you miss those parts. Just because they're not as affectionate doesn't mean they don't care about you. And you'll miss that if you compare yourself. You'll skip over it, right? The next one. I'm gonna try and see how I'm gonna word this. Sorry if this video is all over the place. Sometimes I just share my thoughts. If you struggle with emotional management, I think that's a good way. Loneliness or a deep fear of being abandoned, just a hard truth, you will be triggered probably continuously by your partner, which is why it's important that both of you heal. Avoidance can be very triggering for those who have abandonment issues. Very triggering. Secure individuals are not likely to be as triggered, and fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidance, they do trigger each other, but not nearly as frequently. But anxious, preoccupied, a dismissive avoidant will bump all your triggers and then some. Like, it's just, it can be very challenging and very hard. And so as an anxious, preoccupied, if you are, it's very important that you heal while being in this relationship as well, because otherwise it's going to be very challenging for you. And I'm not saying you're going to heal and they're never going to heal. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But it's very important that both of you heal. And it is an emphasis on your healing regarding your abandonment issues, because otherwise you're going to continuously be triggered. That doesn't mean they're not going to heal, but that's just this point I'm talking about. The sixth one is it's very important to recognize that some avoidants never change. And I have worked with some avoidants that are quite a bit older, 50s, 60s, 70s. Yeah. And they've never changed. Like, they have never changed. Some of these avoidants have been single or unmarried or divorced or whatever it is for like 30 plus years. They don't change. And they usually are very engaged in work. And they do a lot of different things to keep their, lives busy. And it's very important to recognize if your partner has made some progress over the years, this is typically a sign, not always, but it's typically a sign that they're going to continue in that direction. Being blunt, they're probably going to change. Okay? Doesn't always mean they will, but just, something to think about. However, if there is no change in years, maybe this person's not going to change. Just something to keep in mind, okay? And the last one. Okay. I think this is going to trigger some people, but that's okay. Still wanting to be honest. Not all avoidants are the same. That means there are a lot of avoidants out there that will, in fact, not shut down after arguments, that will try to make a difference, that will apologize, that will text you back really quickly. I have so many patients that are avoidants, and they text in 5 minutes to their partners. Like they don't like unanswered texts. Like, there are a lot of avoidants who are like that. There are a lot of avoidants who can't stand seeing their partner cry, and it hurts them. They don't like getting angry at their partner. They don't like breaking their promises. They want to change. And I think that's a hard pill for people to swallow, because it's a lot easier to say, all avoidants are X, Y, and Z. No, avoidants don't change. Avoidants break their promises. All avoidants cheat. Whatever you want to say, instead of accepting that, no, not all avoidants are like that. Maybe just the one you're with is. Sorry. And that's why it's really important to realize if your partner is not showing any progress or they're not doing certain things, perhaps it's just to accept that this is the way they are. The other thing also that I want to put in this particular point is it might mean that they can do those things. They are just not doing it in this particular situation. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow. Avoidant attachment is an attachment issue, largely, right? Meaning it's not intentional. However, typically what happens is if they're in a more healthier environment that is beneficial to their healing or able to nurture some of those aspects, these wounds are able to heal. So if there are no signs of healing, maybe the environment is not healthy, maybe they have a lot of other issues that maybe is not aware of, and maybe there's something else going on. Maybe there's a personality disorder. Maybe there's things they're not telling you. Maybe you don't know the whole story of who they really are. So that's probably something to consider and think about. That's not always the case. They might just be very, very slow to healing. That's common as well. But it's something that's probably something to think about, okay? Sorry if this video was all over the place. Thank you very much for watching. I just want to help you guys. I just want to help. Go ahead and subscribe, like, and I will see you in the next one.